Thank you.
Here we go then.
And here we go.
The stream is just starting, so can you give me a nod, Joe, when we are live?
Looks like we're live.
Oh, we're live. Wonderful. That was quick. Hello and good afternoon, and welcome to Interfaith Insights. Now, today is International Day Against Homophobia, and we're delighted to be joined by Jasvir Singh, a dedicated community activist, family law barrister, BBC Radio 4 contributor, founding chair of City Sikhs, and of course his impactful work has earned him many awards, including a CBE. And Jasvir will be sharing some of his insights on breaking barriers and fostering inclusivity, but also we will delve into his role as the founding chair of City Sikhs, one of the leading Sikh organisations in Britain, which represents over 10,000 members throughout the UK, as they strive to create positive change within society and inspire individuals to reach their fullest potential. Now, in our last programme, I can't believe how long ago, Joe, it seems like it was a long time ago, but I think it was only March when we had Akil Umar from the World Care Foundation. And that was just so incredibly inspiring, learning about the humanitarian work that they were doing in Turkey and Syria. And if you missed that programme, do try and catch it on our Facebook page, as you can with other programmes, and do try and follow us on Twitter at EIFA at Interfaith, and do catch up other programmes on our YouTube page. So, as I was saying at the beginning, today we will be learning about some of the inspiring work of Jasvir. But before we do that, we always dive into positive news stories. Joe, do you have anything you would like to share with us, first of all?
Well, yes, I had the great privilege of attending with my wife the coronation of His Majesty King Charles III and Queen Camilla. And I was very impressed. Jasvir, I've written 40 books in the field of events management. So I was obviously interested in this event from its narrative, the logistics, etc. I was very impressed with the level of inclusivity and diversity that I saw both in Westminster Abbey as well as on the Royal Mall. So well done, Your Majesty, and long may it last.
Fantastic. Jasvir, do you have anything you want to share with us? You're welcome.
Well, my positive story would be that my neighbours have had a baby recently, a little baby girl. Yeah, that's a positive news story from me.
You know what we say in Scots Gaelic when we hear that, Jasvir? Mazel tov. That's Yiddish for congratulations.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. That's a lovely little story. I was saying before we came on here today, just echoing what Joe was saying in terms of the representation. It was great to see that great representation, diverse representation during the coronation. And I was thinking about other high public profile events that we have in the UK, including the Remembrance Day events. I would like to hope that going forward, we have more inclusive Remembrance Day services. If we remember, for example, 1 million soldiers from the Indian regiments who took part in the war, I think it's important that all these communities are represented in those important public events. So hopefully we are moving in that direction. So as I said at the beginning here, today we are learning about some of the inspiring work of Jasvir Singh, who I think it's fair to say has been one of the most prominent Sikh voices in British public life. And recently, obviously received a lot of media coverage, and pictures and video was shared of a beautiful wedding to his husband Nick, who I had the pleasure of meeting. I think Jasvir told me, was one of the first people, fortunately, to meet the handsome couple not long after their wedding. And Jasvir has been taking the brave step of speaking out about his sexuality. And I was reading a quote from him saying that, I've got nothing to hide, and I know that I've got Waheguru God with me, as I've had Waheguru with me all the way. So welcome, Jasvir, to the programme today. And we're going to be talking around important issues of how faith communities can learn to be more inclusive and tackle issues around homophobia, promote equality. So we have a few questions that I have, Joe has, and our listeners have also brought some questions, which is great. And if you are watching on the Edinburgh Interfaith Facebook page, do please feel that you can also add questions onto the chat. The first question, Jasvir, I have for you is, I'd like to know how important your faith has been to you growing up and throughout your life. So just a nice sort of general question.
Sure. Well, Ian, Joe, thanks for having me. And it's a real pleasure to be here. My faith has just been part of me since I was young. I've grown up in a household where the male members all wore turbans, my dad, my uncle, my grandfather. And so for me, being Sikh has simply been part of who I am, having various family events taking place in gurdwaras over the years, having Akhand Parts, which are the 48-hour continuous readings of the Sikh scriptures, organising langars in the gurdwara, organising other family gatherings, weddings, funerals, everything really has been centred around my faith, my Sikh faith, and the family's collective faith. So for me, being a Sikh has simply been who I am. It's not something that I've been complacent about, but I guess I have taken it for granted. And I've also taken for granted all of the positive aspects that it's brought to my life, as well as thinking about some of the more challenging times that I've had over the years.
Could I ask a follow-up to that, Ian?
Of course, Joe.
So how does your Sikh faith influence the tough decisions you've had to make throughout your life, both as a barrister and as an individual with coming out as a gay man?
Straight into it, Joe. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, for me, it's been... So there's an element of positivity that comes with being a Sikh. There's the concept of Chardi Kala, which is the idea that you remain in ever elated spirits, ever positive energy, even when you're challenged and even when you find yourself in the darkest of times. And it's something that has really helped. I mean, being a teenager generally is tough. It doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what background you're from. It's a tricky period of life because you're trying to manage coming from childhood into adulthood and then managing the family relationships as well, relationships with parents, grandparents, siblings. And it's a time when I would say my faith was perhaps tested greatly, but it's also been something where my faith has been it's given me the strength to do what I do. With regards to becoming a barrister, that was influenced to a great extent by seeing what was happening with my with a family member who was undergoing a divorce. And I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time. And I remember seeing her going through the divorce and thinking, precocious 7, 8-year-old that I was, thinking, well, when I grow up, I'm going to be a divorce lawyer, and that way I'll make sure that your divorce goes through quicker. Those were the actual words I said at
Amazing.
that time. And, it's manifested itself. It's, self-actualization, I guess. But I've always been quite a determined individual. And even when things are tricky, I can see that, Waheguru has a plan. I may not know what the plan is, but I know that Waheguru is there. And Waheguru is part of me and part of all of us. It's not some sort of man with a beard high in the sky somewhere, keeping an eye over us. It's the idea that Waheguru is part of humanity. It's part of everyone. It's the idea that it's almost like the life force that exists within all of us. And with Sikhs, the idea is that when we pass away, we want to become one with Waheguru. We don't want to be falling back into what we believe as being the cycle of reincarnation. We want to be freed of our mortal lives. And we want to be at one with the universe, I guess. We want to be freed from those shackles of mortality and be able to live that highly spiritual life. So when you think about the more difficult times, I turn to my faith. I always have and I always will. But I can see people who perhaps find it more difficult to turn to their faith because of how other individuals may try to exclude them from their identity. And that does happen, unfortunately.
Well, just two quick comments. A dear friend of mine recently passed away. She had suffered cancer very badly for 3 years. And at her funeral, the son said, "I do not hate God. I came close, but I do not hate God. I draw my strength from God to get through this difficult time and to admire my mother's courage. And although you're Sikh and I'm Jewish, we share so much in common. In my case, because of Judaism, I've always been a proponent of social justice. I think that's why I agreed to chair IFA. We also support charity as one of our deepest and most important values. Well, you serve at the Langar, which is the most charitable act you can do to feed people, you know? So it's interesting in listening to what you're saying about your faith. It resonates with my own faith, although they're different in terms of theology.
Yeah, and I went to a stone setting very recently for the former co-chair of the Faith Forum for London. She passed away over a year ago, Leonie Lewis, and going to her stone setting, again, the similarities between the ways in which we as humans all practice our faith, but sometimes the way that the practices of that faith can come together really give that sense of connectivity and togetherness, even though the ways in which we may mark certain milestones in our lives are completely different. The intention is virtually the same.
Thank you.
I wondered, just briefly, on the whole thing around interfaith, what inspired your work to? Well, first of all, with City Sikhs, what inspired you to found City Sikhs and the work that you're doing there?
So it was actually the idea of a friend. He went on a leadership program for interfaith communities and for faith leaders, and he on that leadership program, I should say future prospective faith leaders or people who will have some sort of leading role within faith communities or faith activism. And when he went there, he met with the founder of an organization called the City Hindu Network, now known as City Hindus. And he was inspired by that because he thought, if there's an organization such as this for the Hindu community in the City of London, why isn't there one for Sikhs? And maybe I should create one. So he then got together a few of his friends and others who he thought might be interested. Paramdeep is the guy who set it up, and he then brought others along who he thought might share his vision. And as a result of that, the organization was set up. But as soon as we established ourselves in late 2010, other organizations started to reach out to us almost immediately. So the Faith Forum for London reached out to us within about 2 weeks of us being set up. And we joined and became one of the member organizations of the Faith Forum for London very early on. We then worked with the FA, we worked with the organising committee of the Olympic Games in London, LOCOG, and we were educating each of the organisations that we work with, the Football Association, for example, about what it means to be Sikh, but also what inclusivity looks like and how inclusivity should be fostered within those environments, and how to make it a place where interfaith groups can come together, as well as single faith groups and those of no faith. How to make it an environment where everyone feels welcome, but doing so from a point of celebration, not from a point of tolerance or acceptance. It's about going that one step further and really celebrating the individuals rather than just saying, well, I'll tolerate you like someone might tolerate a cold. So it's kind of changing that mindset of how we operate. And I think in the interfaith world, it's changed a lot. I don't know what you think, Ian, and I don't know what you think, Joe, about how it's changed over the last few years, but you've mentioned the coronation, and you could see just how much things have changed there, for example.
And what's interesting about the coronation to me, Ian and Jasvir, is it seemed to be a natural and genuine change, not artificial. It didn't seem to be just stuck in for the purposes of showing inclusivity. It really seemed organic, as though we had been working for a long time to reach this moment.
Yeah, it didn't feel like it was tokenistic at all.
That's right.
it felt as though it was very well thought out and considered, albeit in the context of a Church of England service,
Yeah.
which is what it was. It was
Yeah.
a Church of England service showing that an individual was being coronated, but including others and making sure that they felt fully included.
I think it's very interesting just here that campaigning for inclusivity it feels like it's been part of your DNA, something that you've always done, and with your work with City Sikhs, with your work with Interfaith. And I was looking at the City Sikhs, I don't know if it's one of your mission statements or mottos, but striving to create positive change within society and inspire individuals to reach their fullest potential. It's quite inspiring, but I wondered if you ever felt that your sexuality could be or was a barrier in your community to reaching your full potential.
So personally speaking, I don't think it's ever acted as a barrier. I've been open about my sexuality in my professional life as a family law barrister, right from the very beginnings. It's been operating within a community setting where I had to make a decision about how open I was about my sexual orientation. And it was a decision that I didn't make lightly. I had to think very carefully about, well, if I want to have a strong impact, can I do that if I'm openly gay? And that was a difficult decision for me to make because I was open about my sexuality, and then having to make the decision of, well, perhaps I need to be far more circumspect about who I am within certain realms in order to be accepted, in order to be listened to. That's not a decision that people should have to make, but that was one that I felt I had to at that time. And, I'm talking about 2011, 2012, when City Sikhs was really becoming quite growing exponentially. And that was a period where I had to make that decision. I think if I had been open about my sexuality, it would have had an impact. It would have perhaps prevented a lot of the work that I've gone on to do. But at the same time, that shouldn't be the case. So I felt a bit of a hypocrite, if I'm being honest, because I've been doing all of this equalities work for over 20 years. And yes, I felt that the only way I could do it to the best of my potential was by being not open about my sexuality. Having said that, if anyone ever asked me about it, I would tell them. I had nothing to hide.
Let me ask a related question, if I may, Ian, that follows on for what you were saying about the Church of England service in Westminster Abbey. One of the reasons the Archbishop of Canterbury has been hesitant to support gay marriage is because of the number of church members in the African countries, and the African countries being part of the Commonwealth. I know this is a hard question, so fasten your seatbelt. How do you influence others to accept and embrace difference? And I'm talking about at the government level as well as the grassroots level, so that our poor brothers and sisters who are of the LGBTQ plus community do not have to suffer for much longer in some of these African countries.
I think it's not just African countries we're talking about. We look at Europe, we look at Russia, we look at so many other parts of the world where homosexuality is still illegal, let alone same-sex marriages. I mean, it's tricky. And I'll give this brief example. When my husband and I were trying to work out where we were going to go on honeymoon, I made it crystal clear that I wanted to go to a country where we would be recognized as a married couple. And I think we were left with about, 15 countries out of the entire world where we could go to, where it would be recognized. So that just gives a bit of an idea, a bit of insight into how privileged we are in the UK.
Yes.
And how difficult the situation is for people from diverse sexualities over the majority of the world. Now, when you're talking about the Church of England and some of its challenges, you're talking about a church which is very much established and within England and has a predominant space within the United Kingdom. But you then have the cultural differences that emerge between a church that's based here, where social mores, cultural mores are very different. I mean, when City Sikhs was established, for example, 2010, same-sex marriages were illegal here. You know, we've changed so much over the space of 12 years. But it feels as though the institutions perhaps have a lot of work to do. And it's not something that we can expect other countries to change immediately. And this is where another controversial point perhaps comes in, which is about how those laws which prohibit homosexuality in vast parts of the world came about. And that was as a result of the British Empire. You know, we look at what happened in India with regards to the decriminalization of homosexuality, and the penal code which related to sexuality was only introduced in the 1860s and 1880s, I think. So it was in the late 19th century. Prior to that, homosexuality wasn't an issue within South Asia. It happened. People may have had their own personal views about it, but it wasn't criminalized in any way. And it certainly didn't have any punishment or penalties associated with it. And we're talking about periods of time when the Mughal Empire was in charge of vast parts of South Asia. So we in Britain have an obligation to ensure that change takes place in other countries, partly because it's our fault that homosexuality is still illegal across so many countries. And some countries are now trying to bring in harsher, stricter laws in respect to homosexuality or same-sex relationships. But we also have an obligation not to be, I guess, for want of a better word, preachy about it. Because we can't have changes in society being brought about as a result of reverse colonialism. Us as a country exerting our superiority through our cultural and societal norms upon others. We can't do that. We need to bring them with us. And so the way to do that is to have strong allyship, not tokenistic allyship, not simply saying, well, we support LGBTQ plus rights, but when it comes down to the thick of it, we're not going to do anything about it. We have trade negotiations taking place at the present time with vast parts of the world. Why can't we use this as part of those negotiations? We have various other treaties which we enter into. We have lots of diplomacy that takes place. Some of the diplomacy works really well. I've heard of rainbow flags being flown at embassies belonging to the UK, I think to the UK, but certainly of the US, in countries where homosexuality is illegal. Again, to show that there is that level of support.
Yes.
We saw what happened last year with the World Cup in Doha, and how a huge hue and cry was raised by most of the journalists who went there from the UK and from the US, talking about how human rights issues need to be discussed, and that includes LGBTQ plus rights.
Yes.
So all of these are things, they are all ways in which conversations can be raised, but respectfully, and doing so without finger pointing. Now, I was at an event recently where there was someone from Bahrain, and I had a chat with the person from Bahrain, spoke about illegality issues, and I then raised the issue of, well, homosexuality is still banned over there, isn't it? And he said, yes, it doesn't exist. It never will. It's simply not something that happens in our culture because it's not conducive to family life. And then I said to him, well, I got married last year. My family were there. My husband's family were there. We're thinking of having a family. So you can't really say that, can you? And he was dumbfounded.
Yes.
Because it's the idea that no one confronts individuals when they have those sorts of prejudices. And sometimes you need to do so, but in a place of safety. And we were able to continue to have a conversation. He obviously wasn't going to change his mind, but I'm glad that I had the opportunity to just show him that if one of the excuses you're going to use for banning homosexuality is the fact that family life is simply impossible.
Right.
I'm a living example. Simple as that.
Well, you just passed the goosebump test with this old jaded professor. You gave me goosebumps when you mentioned that you were going to have a family. So I want to talk about that a little bit more later, but Ian, over to you.
Well, I want to just take you back. I have some questions that have come in from that have been sent to me by some viewers, and the first one here is, on a positive note, is about how has your sexuality enriched your faith life, your community, leadership role. Have there been benefits in relation to your service to the community? This is from Peter Fairbrother.
Absolutely. It's, if I'm being honest, I can't imagine my life if I wasn't gay, just as I can't imagine my life if I wasn't Sikh. My turban has given me so much privilege, I would say, in life, because I'm recognized. If I go into a courtroom for one of my court cases, the judge will recognize me immediately and will know who I am. And the same goes to you know, any events that I may be at, or any work that I do. It's easy to see who I am, and I think that's forced me to be in a place of being proud of who I am, and my sexuality does come into it. It has helped me massively. My friendship networks, my family connections, you know, and also when it comes to leadership roles, it's given me a sense of empathy and understanding when it comes to individuals who may be vulnerable, who may have their own challenging times or challenging environments. And it gives me a sense of being able to talk to them as an equal, not necessarily, you know, imposing my views on them, but thinking about ways in which, you know, techniques or things which may have worked for me in the past with regards to my faith, which I can then bring to them or bring to their attention and see if that works. I also do a lot of work with survivors of domestic violence. And as a result of that, as well as, you know, parents whose children have been taken into care. And so with both of those elements, my faith has helped, because I feel that it's not just a job for me, it's service. I'm giving back. I could easily have gone for, say, some sort of corporate law position or gone into becoming a tax expert as a barrister. I didn't want to do that. I wanted the human interest, and I wanted to be able to help people with their personal lives, as well as helping them professionally when it comes to their court cases.
It strikes me just that you have a lot of compassion, and you really want to help people and make a difference, which is really commendable. And I'm wondering if you must also see yourself as a role model now for, you know, maybe minority communities, or there could be people within the Sikh community and other communities who also are thinking about, you know, coming out or are dealing with difficult you know, situations. Do you feel a kind of responsibility in that area?
I do. I definitely do. It's quite a responsibility to take on. But I've had fascinating conversations with friends of mine, as well as from others from South Asian backgrounds. And I'm specifying South Asian, not just Sikh, but Muslims, Hindus, Christians, and many others. And people have come to me and just said that when I spoke about my story, they could see their own lives being reflected for them. And it was something that they hadn't had before, because it's not very often that someone who's a person of color talks about their faith as well as their sexual orientation. It doesn't happen very often. People of color, and in particular the South Asian communities, are very secretive. Secretive is the wrong word to use. They're very private. They don't necessarily want to have their private lives being, you know, aired in public. They want to be able to live their private lives and being able to have that sort of safety net, I guess. And suddenly putting yourself into the spotlight and having one's own story being broadcast in the way that it has been, it does put you in a sense of perspective, and it does, you know, it makes me appreciate that I am to some extent a role model. It's bizarre. I don't see myself as such, but that's how others see me, and they look to me, and they do look to me and my husband, and they do say, you know, congratulations, it was wonderful to see your photos, and then they'll open up and tell me about their story. And it happens so frequently now. I think at least once or twice a week. I think already this week it's happened about 3 times. So, wow. You know, it's and it's something that really every single time anyone says anything of the sort, it moves me, because I thought I was just talking about my own life, and I hadn't appreciated that by doing so I was really allowing others to have the opportunity for their own lives to be celebrated in the same way.
Well, all it takes is one, and thank you for being that one, or in your case, two, with your husband. Speaking of your husband, I've been married for 45 years, and I know in a long marriage, there's lots of negotiation, lots of sometimes compromise. What has it been like to be married and to be out? Do you have to have discussions with your husband, such as you did about, I can only go to one of 15 countries for my honeymoon? What are some of those discussions like?
It's so, compromise is just part of any relationship, if we're being frank. No matter whether you're married or not, no matter whether it's your partner or a parent or a child, it's all about negotiation and compromise. But within marriage, there are different testers, I should say, or different tests and challenges to overcome. And with us, it has been a case of trying to just make sure that we're both being authentically ourselves. That's been the biggest thing that we've had to address. Nick isn't from a Sikh background, but he has embraced my love of my faith, and he also appreciates how much it's important to me, and also within our household. So I'm content saying that we live in a Sikh household. I'm content saying that we are, when we go abroad on holiday, we try to find a Gurdwara to go to. It's just part of what we do now. It's also something where we've agreed when we have children that we would want to bring those children up Sikh. So these are discussions that we have had. We had those pretty early on, though. We've been together for a while, and it's something that we went into the marriage with our eyes fully open. It's not a decision we've made lightly. It's not some sort of frivolous, oh, let's get married sort of decision. It's something that's taken us a long time, not a long time to get to, but it's something that we both value hugely, massively.
What I
And it's
love
not something
about
that we can take for granted. Gay marriage has only been legal in the UK since 2014, I think.
That's right. What I love about this is the same kind of discussions, Ian, are happening between Jewish and non-Jewish partners. As Jasvir said, it is all a negotiation and a compromise, and it's about being your authentic, true self. So thank you for that.
I'd like to share can you all see that on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful photo from. Would you like to explain this photo, Jasvir?
Yeah. So this is just after our wedding ceremony, and this is the confetti shot. Is when we're walking down with all of our friends and family lined up on either side, and it was an incredible moment. It really was, just seeing all of our loved ones from all parts of our lives being there. It's not very often that you get to have your professional, your personal lives all coming together like this, and so yeah, it was incredible.
May I just say, what a gorgeous couple.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
I just want to share that. It gives context, as you say, Joe. So it's a very beautiful photo. I'm just wondering, going back to the question. Obviously, you said now that people are turning to you for support as a role model. Have you anything to say to Sikhs or others who are sort of wrestling with these problems, issues, things to come out at the moment, or what do you advise people to? Where do you start?
It's my journey has been a bizarre one, as I said. I was out, and then I had to be a bit more selective about who I told, and then I've made things public, and it's coming out is a process. It's never something that you do and you say that's the end of it. There'll be people I meet, like the Bahraini individual I told you about, who I had to come out to because his assumption simply was that I was married to a man. married to a woman. So it's one of those things where it's continuous. But if, you know, for anyone who's going through a difficult time at the moment, anyone who's either questioning their sexuality or knows what their sexuality is, but doesn't feel able to share it with everyone or their loved ones or at work, first of all, as long as you are happy in yourself with regards to who you are, that's what matters first. It's about ensuring that you feel confident in who you are. And you don't need to label yourself until you feel confident enough to give it a label. I mean, LGBTQ plus, the Q stands for queer. And queer identity is something where even about 15 years ago, that would have been considered to be an offensive term to use, but it's been embraced by the community. And it seemed to be a way of describing your identity without necessarily giving it a very specific label. And so there may be people who are in, say, heterosexual relationships, heterosexual marriages, who also identify as being queer because they've had those sorts of relationships in the past. They've had same-sex relationships in the past, but they don't necessarily identify as heterosexual today. So it's an all-encompassing term. So when it comes to who you are, the first thing is to start to learn to be comfortable in your own skin. As long as you can do that, the next step would then be to tell the people who you want to. Don't feel forced. Never feel like you have to tell everyone and their dog about it. It's about realizing who you are first and then sharing that as good and happy news with others. And you may not feel it's good and happy news to share with others. You may feel that actually it's going to be something that is upsetting for some of the people you tell, especially, you know, close family, perhaps, parents, grandparents. But it's about managing that at your own pace and never to feel forced that you have to tell someone about your sexuality.
I was going to ask, Jasvir, related to that, I mean, it must be difficult, you know, when it's out in the open, obviously, especially, I guess, maybe with the situation that you found yourself in, that it became out in the public with, you know, leaked photographs or clips from your wedding. And I'm sure you must have found people who were very supportive, but also, you know, some nasty stick also coming at the same time. I just wonder how you deal with that. I guess you have a strong support network of friends. A lot of people have reached out to you.
Good
Yes,
question. Ian.
I've had a strong network of friends since I was a teenager. So some of my friends I've known for almost my entire life, and they have been there throughout. My family have been there, strongly supportive throughout. It's taken a while for a couple of them to come to terms with it and to go beyond just tolerance, as I was saying earlier, but they've made their own journeys and they've got their own journeys to make. I've been lucky in that respect. It was unfortunate when things were being leaked from the wedding, and I felt that was a violation of my privacy. And so part of the reason why I wanted to talk about my sexuality openly was because I wanted to reclaim my own narrative. I wanted to own that again. I didn't want to feel as though I was beholden to others. I mean, over the years, I've been referred to as a gay infidel on a Sikh TV channel. I've been referred to as someone saying to me, again on social media, if you were like this in the past, then I'm sure you would have been sacrificed like a goat. I've had some horrible stuff said to me. I've also been, when the video was leaked, the wedding video, the caption that it had with it was something along the lines of Jasvir Singh from City Sikhs has married his long-term boyfriend very recently. Hopefully now he'll keep his nose out of anything religious. So it's been a way of weaponizing my relationship against me. And that's caused difficulties, if I'm being honest. It's caused tense times between my husband and I, because when I'm experiencing that sort of feeling of, all of that attention on me, of having that sort of hatred being thrown at me, I have to remember it's not just me, it's that my husband as well. And so we're both experiencing that challenging time. And when we're having that, it causes tension, as it would do in any relationship.
Of course.
So it has been tough, and I'm not sugarcoating it.
Mm.
But at the same time, all of these attempts to, I guess, silence me, to remove me from the scope of discourse when it comes to the Sikh community, it hasn't worked, obviously. I'm still here. And I guess it's given me strength, because it's been that feeling of, well, I'm not doing anything wrong, but if these people are getting upset, then maybe it's causing change, and it's resulting in a change that needs to take place within society. That's how I'm looking at it.
Thank you. Speaking of giving you strength, I'd like to hear your views about the current debate about gender. We know, for example, that there are trans exclusionary folk who are very upset over self-identification with gender. We know, for example, in the country of my birth, the United States, we have states now banning things like drag shows because they feel they're a negative influence to communities. What would you say to this debate to bring the kind of courage and confidence that you seem to have as part of your journey?
Jasvir, just before you answer that, we have had a question from one of the viewers, which is along the same lines, and I think you've sort of touched on this. And the question from Maxwell was around the lines of, does the Sikh community accept and affirm trans people and people of non-conforming gender expressions? Now, I think you've touched on it already, that this is, it's a difficult issue for a lot of the Sikh community. And of course, one of the difficulties for a lot of faith communities, issues are not talked about in scripture. I think issues around sexual orientation maybe are in some scriptures are, but I'm not sure they are directly actually touched upon within Sikh scripture at all. And I know from talking to you, you don't see any conflict between, I think, the religion's teachings and sexual orientation. So I wonder what you think the views are here on, and Joe's asking you, a wider question as well. You're on the spot with this one.
No, I can tell, blimey. I would say, so again, we need to look at the history and the social context of the Sikh faith. When the Sikh faith emerged, it was created at a time when the idea of homosexuality wasn't something that was unknown. Homosexuality is mentioned within the Quran, for example. The gurus had read the scriptures of other faiths, in particular the Hindu and the Muslim faiths. So the gurus were aware of homosexuality. And yet the scriptures do not mention any prohibition against homosexuality. I'm going to leave that to others to consider why that might be the case. There is a prohibition on lust, and lust is considered to be one of the five thieves, alongside greed, pride, and a few others. But lust is considered to be lustful thoughts and lustful being. It doesn't talk about a loving relationship. So it's important to contextualize the faith within one's own understanding. And the beauty about Sikhi, the beauty about the Sikh faith, is that the scriptures are our guide. We don't have any other interceder. We go directly to the scriptures and we make our decisions on our lives, on our daily lives, based on what the scriptures tell us. Now, obviously, everyone's going to have their own individual interpretation, but the fact of the matter remains that there are no interceders. When it comes to issues such as trans individuals within the Sikh faith, I would probably go further. I don't think trans people have ever been excluded from being seen. There is a strong third gender identity that exists in South Asia, and in particular in India and Northern India. And those individuals have never been told they can't go to a godfather. They've never been told that they can't be seen. There are stories told about Guru Nanak meeting a fakir who was dressed in a bridal outfit, wearing all of the jewelry, all of the adornments that a bride would wear, and it was effectively the fakir was saying that he identified as he was dressed as such because he was wanting to be married to his beloved being the Almighty. And it was about that sense, the Sufi sense of being separated from one's beloved, which is how the relationship between the individual and the Almighty is seen to be. That idea of wanting to be reunited with one's greatest love. But he took it literally, and he dressed up in a bridal outfit. So you can see an image of someone who's, I guess, in drag, or maybe trans, but you don't know how they identify, speaking to Guru Nanak. It's a painting, it's a story. So I think when it comes to those sorts of those sorts of concepts, you need to do the research. If you haven't done the research, then you won't know what the thought process may have been 300, 400, 500 years ago. And when it comes to how we react in the present day, that talks a lot about the fragility of the individuals. If people have a fragile faith themselves, then I can assure you they wouldn't be able to cope with some of the stuff that I've had to deal with in the past. They would have left the faith. If you are fragile in your identity, then you will be feeling frightened and scared by things that you don't necessarily see in your daily life. And that's what we're seeing, unfortunately. But it's that sense of fragility. It's not something that comes from a place of confidence in their identity. It's the fact that they feel scared. And so when you're scared, you react in a certain way. That's my take on it, I would say.
I agree. It comes from a place of insecurity and fear. Yeah. I'd like to ask one final question on my end, Ian, if I may. You mentioned one day possibly having children with Nick. If you're blessed with children, what kind of world do you hope for them? We see, for example, so much evolution in our lifetime, the last 10 years, in terms of rights for people in the LGBTQ plus community. But as I mentioned earlier, we still see tremendous bias and homophobia throughout the world. What are your hopes and ambitions for the next generation?
My hopes would be that we have a world where diversity is celebrated around the world, not just in certain pockets, not just in the 15 countries that I was mentioning earlier, but as much as possible elsewhere. I hope for a world where climate change can be stopped. It may never be reversed, but we can try to bring things to an end. I hope for a world that's compassionate, that's accepting and of difference and diversity. I also hope for a world where I am able to understand and appreciate what my children's perspectives would be as they grow up. Because there's been great change, as you've said, societal change over the last 10, 15 years. We don't know what may come around as changes in the next 10 to 15 years. There may have been something I've said in this particular conversation, which is considered to be abhorrent in about 15 years' time. And so we need to be mindful of the fact that society is continuing to change. We're not fossilized, we're not ossified, but we need to be open to accepting that change and embracing it. And I'm reminded by something that an elderly relative did when she saw the leaked video of the wedding. She's in her 90s, and her response on seeing the video was, as long as he's happy.
Oh,
Another
goosebump moment. I just want to close my Ian, by saying that my hope and ambition for the world, now having met my new friend Jasvir, is that there'll be more men and women and others like you in the world. If I needed a family law advisor, and I hope I never do, I would make only one call to your office, because you have the kind of principles and the kind of compassion that are held in balance that I think will bring forth a better world. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you. I just have two short questions, just here, and then we'll bring things to a close. What would you say can be done to support faith communities and places of worship to become more inclusive and welcoming to members of the LGBTIQI plus community, you know, from your experience?
There's a huge amount of work that needs to be done. And it's going to involve a lot of work being done by those in charge of the various places of worship, first of all, to ensure that they are inclusive. I mean, I still remember as a 9-year-old having who was it? It was someone who was not born into a Sikh family, but had embraced the faith. She was from a white British background, and she was performing seva in the Langar Hall, and she encountered racism from the Punjabi Sikhs there, and that was, you know, something that I found abhorrent. So but this was a very long time ago. I'm hoping that isn't the case these days. But there may well be other forms of discrimination taking place in gurdwaras at the present time, as well as in mosques, synagogues, churches, mandirs, and other places of worship. So I'd say first things first is to tackle all elements of discrimination. And perhaps having someone, if you have an organizing committee, perhaps have someone who's an equalities officer, just to make sure that you're able to address the various challenges that will arise. Because it may be something as little as, you know, having to have when it comes to discrimination, it might be something as little as having to have a wheelchair ramp for a certain section or a certain area where wheelchairs would be permitted. But having the wherewithal to have the discussions with those who would use that ramp to make sure that it's not just tokenistic, that it can actually be used properly.
That's something that's been raised with me by Gurdwaras, some members of Gurdwaras in the past, that these are relevant issues to all our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say a qualities officer would be the first thing that can be done, and to make sure it's not tokenistic, to make sure it's done through proper conversations and dialogue.
And the final question, the final words I want to leave you with you is reflecting on your incredible life journey to date. What piece of advice has been most helpful and supportive to you, that you can leave with our viewers?
Gosh, that's a tough one. That really is. The word of advice that I would give is this: everyone is their own person. Everyone's different. We need to understand that, and we need to respect that difference. But at the same time, if you need support, reach out to people who you love, who you trust. They're the people who will give you the support that you need. They are the ones who will have your best interests at heart. And when you feel confident enough, they are the ones who will be celebrating with you, whatever situation you find yourself in, be it at your wedding, be it at another sort of public declaration, whatever it may be, those are the people who are going to be with you for your life. So once you know who those loved ones are, they could be your siblings, your parents, they could just be your best friend, it could be someone that you've known from work, whoever it is, take them into your life and let them support you in the way that you need to be supported so that you can be truly happy.
Jasvir Singh, I want to thank you so much for your time. You've inspired us so much. Your compassion has shone through. Do pass our love and regards to Nick as well. And looking at the comments that are online, there is a lot of love and admiration for you today. So I'd like you to take that away. And just thank you so much for your time. And thank you everyone who has tuned in to this incredibly powerful episode of Interfaith Insights. And take care and have a very pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jasvir.